Well, welcome all. So we're just about through with August and getting ready for Labor Day, the beginning of the presidential campaign. It's good to have a little time together where we'll get a little silence into this. Uh, I was, as I was sitting there just meditating, was thinking about the two Teresa. Well, I've had three Teresas in my life. One woman I taught with, Teresa Giardino, Sister of Charity for 18 years, taught with her. Uh, I'm thinking of Mother Teresa. Sort of always been my guiding principle when I started this endeavor 18 years ago here at Loose Leaf Hollow. I just was following her principle: do the work, and God will provide. And it's always got us through. Although the first 2.5 years really tested everything because we weren't making enough to meet the rent every week going into our savings. But since then, worked out. And then Teresa of Avila, who said, whose hands would God have but yours? Whose feet would God have but yours? And, when you think about the world, the condition of the world, you know, it's up to us to take care of each other. It's up to us to, it's the Matthew 25, is to feed the poor, to uh, we're God's hands, we're God's agents. And it's up to us to do these things. And so, really, uh, I've lived by that principle and it still works, just paid the bills and we had enough money to pay the bills. So thanks again for all you guys who are chipping in. Some of you on an absolute regular basis. Uh, I appreciate that. Well, like I said, I started this Loose Leaf Hollow in 2002, and early on, I had a marketing guy came and did a retreat, and he had a good retreat, and he said, he said, you really got to get bigger. He said, you're really good. You got to really get bigger. And I said, oh, well, and he said, then he threw something at me. I had no idea what he was talking about. I said, what's your core demographic? You're going to help me market this. He said, what's your core demographic? And I said, well, I don't know. What are you talking about? He says, well, I mean, who did you create this place for? And I said, oh, that's what you mean. I said, I created it for monks without monasteries. And he sort of laughed, but that really was it. Uh, for people who somehow wanted to live a quieter, saner, more grounded, holy life, but didn't want to enter a monastery or a convent to do it. You know, and so really that's always been the place. Monks without monasteries, and those are sort of the kind of people who show up, whether they know it or not, whether they know anything about monks or not. They're looking for something that they can't find out there. So he said, well, what do you think that core demographic is? How many people? And I said, back then I said about 6 billion, because one way or another, people are looking for something they're not finding in the world. And so anyway, I was thinking about that, and also thinking about the grace. I keep trying to think of the fierce grace of this pandemic. And because of this pandemic, here we are. And really, I'd call this a monastery without walls. I don't know what, there's almost 40 people tuning in now, which is about somewhere between 40 and 50. I never had that many people in here. They can't fit in the walls, you see. So we really are in a monastery without walls right now. And that always strikes me from the very beginning, when people just show up. In the old days, in both Asian and 1,000 years later in Christian monasteries, Catholic monasteries, when you showed up at the monastery, you usually had to wait 5 or 6 days and out in the cold and the rain and whatnot, because they really wanted to find out if you really wanted to be a monk or a nun, or if you just wanted to have a rough and a meal and stuff. So you had to wait. some of you have experienced the virtual version of that, trying to get into Zoom on some given days. Well, if you persist, you get in, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Um, so I guess this morning I just want to do something short in terms of a talk, because I really want to get to the heart of the heart-to-heart session, which is the meditation, which is the silence. I remember one of my first walks with with Father Gregory at the monastery, who taught me for 18 years. I said, "Well, tell me about the vow of silence." And he said, "Well, we don't take a vow of silence." I said, "You don't?" That was news to me, because that's what you think about when you think of Trappists and monks and such. He said, "No, we don't take a vow of silence." I said, "Well, what vows do you take?" And he said, "Well, we take a vow of obedience, a vow of stability, and a vow of total transformation." And so I want to talk about the first vow. I said, "Well, all right, a vow of obedience." I said, "That means what the abbot says goes." And he says, "Well, yeah, but it's deeper than that." He said, and then he threw some Latin at me. I never took Latin in high school or college, so it's always new to me. And he said, "Obedience doesn't mean just obeying. It means it comes from the Latin ab audiens, audio. It means to listen. A vow of obedience is you're taking a vow to listen." And he said, "To really listen, you need silence." And that was the first opening into the monastic world for me. And then, and then that chimed in with the very first line of the Rule of Saint Benedict, which these monks and many other monastic communities follow. The first line is listen with the ear of the heart. So it's about listening. Silence, without silence, is very hard to listen. It's really a noisy world. It's going to get increasingly noisy in the next 60 or so days. All the shouting and the screaming of a campaign such as it is in America, it's a lot of noise. And so, if nothing else, showing up on Sunday and having a period of just a silent listening, to become a listening presence, and just, if you've tried this, there's a certain amount of racket going on in your own head, your own ego voices rattling around. So it takes a little bit of time to sort of leave those behind and sink into a deeper silence. But with practice, you can do it. You can do it, and with practice, it gets easier and easier. And but I'm talking about years of practice. I'm talking about decades of practice, whatever time we have left, but it does get easier. And in the silence, there comes a calmness. When they talk about stillness in meditation, I used to think it was about sitting rigidly and, absolutely still. Is really not. And as a matter of fact, the only time you'll ever be absolutely still is when you're dead, because then you'll have rigor mortis and you'll be absolutely still. It's not that at all, because we're breathing. The breath is key, and there's some subtle movements. Nothing's still if you think about it. As soon as we hit the gong, you always usually realize that all those thoughts are there, and then breathing, blood flow. So really, it's not the stillness we're talking about. We're talking about laying aside for a few minutes the thoughts. Evagrius Ponticus, a Syrian desert father in the 4th century, he said, a contemplation is the laying aside of thoughts for a while. And it doesn't mean thoughts go away ever. It doesn't mean you push them out of the way. But it just means when you find yourself thinking a thought and holding on to it, you just let it go. You lay it aside. And somehow then you just fall into a deeper silence. It's just the natural gravity of the situation. It's like a homing device. So you don't have to, my first teacher, Zen teacher, Suzuki Roshi, he said, takes a terrific amount of effort to get to your meditation cushion. But as soon as you sit down, all effort ceases. So it takes there's a lot of people who, every week could say, "Oh, gee, I couldn't make it on Sunday," blah blah blah. I mean, I don't really care. You don't have to confess to me. I'm just glad when people show up, and you don't have to just because you're signed up. You don't have to show up. It's not a mortal sin or anything, but it does take some effort to get here. But then once we start, let go of all effort. That's the trick. So when we actually hit the gong, and really now, as you listen, just let go of all effort and just be a listening presence. Maybe something I say will resonate with your heart. Well, all right, take that to the bank. But then when we hit the gong and we become just a deeper listening presence, you're just listening. It's okay, the thoughts that come, your ego shouting about whatever you should be doing instead of doing this. It's all right. You're listening to that. You're just not, you're not trying to push it away, become an empty mind, and you're not trying to, you don't take the bait. If you take the bait, you're thinking about thoughts. And then that keeps you above that second dotted line that leads you into the real contemplative silence, where there can be this meeting we talked about, where you're meeting the listening presence of God, the divine, however your language is. There's a meeting that happens, but you have to look. It's like you're frisked at the door to this place. My Dutch Zen master used to say, "Leave your shoes and your ego outside the zendo." So you're as long as you're thinking about stuff, you're in the ego world. Not bad, but we're making this descent into this place where we're connected to everybody. Although it might seem like nothingness, might seem like nothing's happening. That's fine, you see. So we're dropping into a listening presence and that's obedience. That's the first bow. We practice listening. The opposite of obedience is absurdus. That's where the word absurd comes from. Paul Goodman wrote a book called Growing Up Absurd, which we all do in this culture because we don't grow up listening to life. We grow up listening to CNN or Fox News or cable TV or, so-called authority figures, but we're not really listening to this deeper telecast 24/7. Before cable news, there was this broadcast going on 24/7, and that's what we do when we go into silence. And it's not an effort, to paraphrase Yoda, there is no try. There's no trying to meditate. You just allow yourself to sink into the silence. You allow yourself to not hold on to thoughts or not even try to resist them, not try to get rid of them. You just allow yourself to sink. It's why they call falling in love falling. It's another level of falling in love, you see. You can't control a fall. And when you do, if you've ever actually fallen in love at least once in your life, you realize it's, you're not trying to do it, you just fall in love. And so this is a kind of practice of falling in love because you can't control a fall. So there's nothing to do. When you come back, when you bounce up and you're doing a lot of stuff, you just say, oh, let's let it all go. You fall back in love. So it's we're constantly falling in love during 20 minutes of meditation. I am falling out of love, falling into love. Yeah, look at it that way sometime. And it might appeal a little bit better. Okay, so we're going to go into it. And when we come out of it, the listening continues because really the art of conversation, which we do at in the third part, the art of conversation is really listening. Not so much the speaking. Because most of us don't speak, you see, here when we got 43 people here now, most of us won't speak. But the beauty of the third session is that there's a deep listening that can happen. And so it's all a listening presence all the way through. So, well, bon voyage. And I'll just give you a little bit of a nudge, words wise, and then we'll just drop. And as you know, one thing that enables the letting go is just that sacred breath that we've practiced off and on. I use it every day, throughout the day, just the breathing in through the nose. Nice, full, deep, and then breathing out through the mouth. This is going to be a lifeline during the campaign because the nervous system will get all hyped up. And the sacred breath switches the nervous system out of fight or flight into a calming, a relaxing mode. And you're going to save 60 days of wear and tear on your nervous system, plus the days after the election. Who knows what that's going to be? And this will take a terrific wear and tear on your nervous system. You know, just it will. And so to have this sacred breath of just breathing in through the nose, breathing out through the mouth. There's some neurological thing that happens and some real deep calming mechanism that happens, and we'll need that. I need that. So that's something I do all through the day. And you can start the meditation session during the ringing of the bell. Just breathe that way and see what happens. Just breathing in and out. In through the nose, out through the mouth. We can breathe. This is the greatest gift there is, as we've learned all too horrifically lately. We can breathe. Just a few words to nudge us downward. Be still and see that we are love. Be still and see that we are. Be still and see. Be still. Be.